Hello, and welcome back to Women, Food, and Dogs slash my YouTube channel. Thank you for being on this journey as we figure out together what exactly this channel is going to be, and I hope it's helpful to you. Today, I wanted to make a video about shifting our state and when this can be helpful, what this can look like, um, what is important to know about so that it doesn't become toxic positivity, but where it can actually be very helpful, very useful, very self-supportive and self-loving. Really helpful for you if you so I think this channel seems like it's going to have certainly like a flavor of support for anyone who is going through recovery when it comes to like disordered eating, eating disorders. I'm a therapist, that's the population that I work with most of the time, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. And so that sort of started the spark for this. My interests are clearly much broader than that. So you're going to see that. I think that a lot of this will be applicable to a lot of different experiences. And that just might be the lens that it comes through because that is often the lens that it's coming through in my day-to-day work. And this video in particular will be helpful if you are someone who tends to feel very overwhelmed or pulled around by your emotions. Also, oh, maybe this will be a different video. Sometimes when we're going through, I'll talk about it in the context of disordered eating, eating disorder recovery, but this can be the case in a lot of different experiences where it's like if we've numbed our emotions in some way, shape, or form for a very long time, when we start to feel again and like our viscera starts to come back online in that way, it can feel wildly uncomfortable, extremely overwhelming, and it can sometimes come in a little bit fast and furious. And so this video, I would say like this concept during that period of time, it might not land as in the same way. I don't think that I'm trying to think of like, I would say for me personally, I don't think it would have landed during that time. And with the people that I've worked with would be the same. The other thing I will give as like a info at the beginning of this is I'll use examples from my personal life to kind of illustrate the concepts that I am speaking about. Hopefully it helps it to land a little bit more and just kind of is the easiest because they're the experience that I know the most intimately. And of course, it's inspired by the breadth of my work. That's not something that I can speak about. So because of like the confidentiality element and protecting the people that I work with. So this video, shifting your state, what does that mean? So essentially, the way I would like describe this is like if you are going through a certain experience that is an emotional experience, and there comes a moment where you're noticing that for whatever reason, the emotion that you're feeling is kind of like controlling you in a way, this is something maybe to explore with. Now, there's like a lot of nuances in this that it's can be a little bit hard to cover every element of it. There's a lot of discernment involved in this because what I'm not talking about is suppression or avoidance of our emotions. It's really important to feel our emotions. It's very healthy to feel our emotions. I'm a very sensitive, very emotional person. And this has been a really important kind of skill or tool, if you will, in my personal life and something that I talk about in my work all the time because otherwise it's very easy to be bogged down by our emotions, and it's also easy to kind of conjure up emotions and then create like a state of uncomfortable emotion that isn't moving us through anything. So shifting your state is essentially, let's say, for example, I'm feeling fear and sadness around something. And I acknowledge this is like a bit of a marker that I sometimes use with this one. I'll say for me personally, it is accurate and useful, is like if you acknowledge the emotion that you're feeling, you speak it to yourself, you do the empathy and you get it right that we're taught about in maybe I should like explain that a little bit more. So in graduate school as therapists, at least in the province and country where I live, there's like this huge emphasis on empathy and hitting the nail on the head when it comes to the empathy that you are giving to your client. So it's like what it should happen is if you get it right, the client then feels this like, oh, like they feel seen, they feel gotten, and it touches that thing in them so that then they can relax and exhale. And this is also a skill that we can learn with ourselves, which is like, I talk about it as acknowledgement a lot of the time, where it's like, whatever it is that we're going through or experiencing, sometimes it is naming the emotion. There is research that suggests that this helps lower the intensity of the emotion, which is how you can discern in this whether it's about feeling the emotion or it's about shifting your state. A lot of times it's going to be both, or like one and then the other, or vice versa. This is not a black and white categorical linear thing, because we are not black and white categorical linear beings. We are human beings, and we are sensing and perceiving our environment all the time. And there's so many layers to that. So it's very multidimensional. But that acknowledgement piece, so one way that you can know which way to go is like, do I need to go down the route of feeling my emotions, or do I need to shift my state? Which is essentially kind of taking the reins and shifting your focus so that you create a different experience emotionally for yourself. And is when you, so one way to know is you give yourself that acknowledgement. And if you give yourself the acknowledgement of like, I'm feeling really afraid and really sad about XYZ right now, and your body kind of softens and gives an exhale, and there's like a comforting element, it's like there's a softening to it. It might be information of like, okay, you hit the nail on the head, and then you can kind of, maybe there's like emotion like viscerally somehow in your body that's moving, and then afterwards, a lot of times when we really do fully feel, afterwards we're good to go. Like the emotion has moved, the emotion has done, if there's an action associated with it that the body wants to do, and that has happened and it's been moved through, then a lot of times there isn't a lot that has to happen afterwards. And so what can though sometimes happen is like, we are feeling our emotion, and then we're analyzing our emotion, and then we're feeling it more, and then we're in it, and then we're constructing a home in there, and then we're just there, and we don't even know where the way up and out is. That is where this comes in. So it's like, if we find that, and this is the subtlety of it that can take time, and I would say sometimes it's like we have to go through certain experiences or like visceral lessons before we sort of like understand, like know what this feels like. I think it's very personal to each of us as well. But basically, there starts to be kind of a sense of like, an example I'll use from my personal life right now is that I'm in a season where I'm very challenged. There's a lot of things in my life and yeah, like tasks and beings relying on me and things like that that feel kind of like beyond my mastery, beyond what I feel confident in and knowledgeable enough to be able to handle. So I feel stretched and I feel challenged, and sometimes I feel overwhelmed, and sometimes I would say like definitely noticing more anxiety in my day-to-day life than I would in like a normal day. I'm also sleep deprived because I have a little puppy. And so there's a lot of layers. So I'm noticing that all of that is happening. I'm stretched, and my emotions when I am stretched in that way, and especially sleep deprived, can be a little bit more unhinged and just not as, what's the word? It's not that there's anything wrong with what I'm feeling or how I'm feeling. I am definitely more emotional when I'm sleep deprived. I think a lot of us are, especially as women. But I'm just noticing that it's not necessarily, that I'm just moving through emotions. It's kind of like everything is just firing on all cylinders. And so for me, I know that I'm not going through something that is painful or challenging in that way, where I'm not going through something sad. I'm not going through something, you know what I mean? But sometimes I do feel sad because there have been changes where I miss aspects of my old life a few months ago, but then this life is so beautiful. And this is like this is what it is to kind of like be deeply feeling person and be fully in life, is sometimes it is kind of a lot. And this is why I'm talking about this, is because I think it's an important skill to have. So for me personally, what I have been doing a lot and recognizing is needed is like, I need to, for me, I've been listening to Abraham Hicks a lot. Never was a big Abraham Hicks person. Sometimes it resonates, sometimes it doesn't. Lately, it is the thing for me that helps me shift my state. And so, because there's a lot of demand on my time and energy and attention right now, and skills that I don't yet have. And it's easy to just kind of like feel overwhelmed and like want to hide under the bed, but I can't. And so, that is where like really having, I want to say discipline. I don't mean it in a perfectionist way because I'm certainly not perfect right now. But practicing some discipline about where I'm putting my focus and how I'm starting my days and the thoughts that I'm giving weight to and giving my focus, attention, and energy to is part of how I'm shifting my state. Other ways that sometimes either I in the past have shifted my state or people can shift their state. I mean, certainly getting out in nature is a big one. Water, like jumping in the ocean, jumping in a lake, jumping in a shower, whatever that might be. Even just splashing water on your face can sort of shift your state in a moment. Sometimes writing out, so this is something I actually did yesterday because I was feeling anxious and overwhelmed, was writing out the positive aspects of a certain experience. And again, this is where there's nuance because when you're going through something painful, we don't want to quote unquote like use these tools, if you will, to, it's like, bypassing, or like this is when people talk about toxic positivity. It's like when you're using those resources and tools to avoid or suppress your emotions. But like anything, it's always great. There's always nuance, and there is a time and a place. Because, for example, for me yesterday, I could have gone down this like endless loop of like, oh my God, and then this happened, and then that happened. And then I'm like in the energy and I'm focusing on everything that's going wrong and everything that is overwhelming me and everything that's not the way that I wanted in that exact moment and all the things that I'm sad about or frustrated about or stressed about. And again, like this is where that nuance lies because those emotions are important, but it's like, again, fully felt. Have I talked about that in this take yet? Fully felt, it doesn't last. It can be moved through quite quickly. I'm always hesitant to say because everybody's so different. We are so unique. And this is why I'm going to come back to the discernment thing like 100 times because it's sort of getting to know yourself personally. And this is what I have learned about myself personally. And I'm using it as an example so that it's like a reference point for you to be like, okay, what do I know about myself personally? How do I notice I feel? Whereas maybe a different example, I'm trying to think recent just because it's easier to remember. Okay, so I have recently added a new puppy into our lives. So now I have 2 dogs. And my adult dog, who's 3, her and I have been on a journey together. It's like 2 peas in a pod, 2 of us against the world, long story short, very connected. And our life had gotten to this place previous to bringing our puppy home where it was very peaceful, very easeful, very connected, very like just non-verbally getting each other. A lot of ease, a lot of peace, a lot of quiet. And of course you bring a puppy into that and it completely does change the dynamic. The puppy was definitely, I know that she wanted a friend and the puppy's a whole other story. And probably worth mentioning, they're both working dogs. You can listen to my other podcast about that. Anyways, or episode, YouTube, whatever it's called. Anyways, so I have moments where, as much as I love him, the puppy, very much, and I love seeing them together, there are moments where I miss the times when it was just the 2 of us. There's a little bit of like, I don't want to say grief because that's probably more intense than it really is, but it's like just like like anything in life. I don't yet have children, but I imagine, when there's like another different experience of this when someone adds a second child and you're like, okay, you're not my only baby anymore. It's not just the 2 of us. Especially like I mentioned at the beginning, if you feel very deeply, very sensitive, very emotional, very sentimental person here. Very, very much so. And I would say, of course, I'm human. Of course, I'm never perfect. And part of why I'm passionate about this is because, like, there have been times in my teenage years and early 20s and such where, like, that depth of experiencing life and the world, like, I absolutely hated it. It completely overwhelmed me. I didn't to the point where at times it was like, why would I, like, how do I shut this down? How do I live on this earth? How do I exist on this planet? I know a lot of people experience this. And so it's part of why I'm passionate about this, because it's like the more that we embrace who we are, which is like, that is just the truth of who I am for now. I don't know, maybe it'll change. I think it's pretty innate, but I'm not attached to it. And I can say that maybe this will be a different video about like accepting yourself and that creating freedom. But it's like the more that I've just acknowledged and accepted that this is who I am and then work with it, it creates so much more freedom and so much more joy in life. Speaking of, this is going to popcorn a little bit all over the place, but part of shifting your state, just to bring it back to that for a second, there might be a layer in there too of building a tolerance for positive emotions, because sometimes that can feel vulnerable, it can feel uncomfortable, it can feel really unfamiliar and unsettling if that's not something that we're used to. And so there are layers in this as a tool. This is not like, you know, I don't know, a hammer and a nail that's just going to solve the problem, because as human beings, we're not problems to be solved. So there's the nuance of that. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, feeling sad. So missing our previous peaceful life sometimes, even though I love him so much. She's here and he's there at this moment. So that's why I'm doing this with my hands. Anyways, there are moments where I'll just look at her and cry, and I'll just feel, I don't even know what word would describe the emotion that I'm feeling. It's not really sad. It's not really grief. It's not really, I don't know. It's just change. It's just emotions around change. And I'll feel it, and I'll maybe like some tears will fall. I'll give her a kiss, and then I'll carry on with my day. And my day is not impacted by that emotion. And I'm not suppressing it. I'm not needing to do anything with it. It's just moving. It just needs to move, right? And that is sort of, I would say, like a different example of when it's like just letting the emotion move. It's like you don't need to do anything with it, and that's the discernment. Whereas, you know, yesterday, for example, when kind of one thing was going wrong after another and I was starting to get spun up about it and I was feeling frustrated, and my frustration was valid. Like I could tell you a story about my day and my frustration was valid. And this is where the discernment of knowing when, like, you know, feeling this emotion, is this something that I need to feel and let it move and move on that way? Or is this something where it's like important for me to take the reins and shift where my focus is so that I can shift my state and into a more positive one? So going all the way back, I believe what I was speaking about was writing out positive aspects, which is like that's what I did yesterday. And it did really shift my state. And then I noticed life around me shift. And so this is where it is nuanced, and I feel like I keep needing to say, but I know that I don't, because I trust that you are going to take from this what you're going to take from this, which is that it's not about suppressing emotions, because is a time and a place. If I go back a little bit more of like a time in my life when I was going through grief, I can almost confirm that I was not thinking about shifting my state very much during that time, unless it was like a different kind of like compartmentalizing, you know, like we all have to do sometimes, where we have to show up for certain things, and that's just part of life when you're going through grief. But I will say, like, that was a completely different experience, and there was a lot of emotion in that I could feel at that time. This is like recent-ish, but a while ago, where I'm just trying to remember where it's like, and because I just want to share this so that some of the discernment you have some examples where it's like I could feel that was not what was needed. And so part of this is like, this is why if I were to work with you, I want to support and facilitate you getting to know your own system, your own self, and what you need. And that's where I talk. If you spend time on this channel, you'll probably hear me talk about eating disorder recovery as a transferable skill in life, because a lot of recovery is basically learning how to be with ourselves through difficult emotions, difficult experiences, and not turn on ourselves, excuse me, and not abandon ourselves or turn it on our body, turn it on ourselves, that type of thing. And this is part of that, because sometimes we might be going through something challenging, but the part of us that's going to conjure up a familiar experience of frustration or overwhelm or anxiety is not the part of us that's actually going to carry us through that experience into a greater capacity and a new version of ourselves that can then handle that experience, if that makes sense. I'm quickly looking at my notes to make sure that I'm not missing anything really important. When I was preparing for this earlier this week, I wrote down some notes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. So, oh, shoot, did I already talk about giving yourself the acknowledgement? I think I'm just, listen, this channel, as mentioned, life is stretching me right now. So this channel might be fairly unedited. It's probably going to be, I don't intend to edit this really. I think I'm just going to post it as is. So I hope that it's helpful for you. Am I missing anything major? Basically, I had written down here, which I don't know if I have said this, when I was listening back to my first voice note to myself about this idea. If we don't know how to shift our state when we feel challenged by life, we will feel controlled by our emotions. So if you think about it, it's important to know what shifts your state, and it's important to know when that is needed versus a different kind of way forward for yourself in that moment. What shifts our state, like I said, can be so varied. For me right now is listening to Abraham Hicks. Sometimes it's gardening, sometimes it's being outside, and that can have beautiful elements. And this is where it is personal. Being in nature, super helpful, beautiful. And there are moments where I'm out there and I am just overwhelmed because I have a property and it's brand new to me and I'm not used to it. And I can be a little bit of a perfectionist if I let myself go there. And so sometimes I'll be out there and I will just feel overwhelmed with all the things I need to do out there, and it's not helping me shift my state. And so this is where it's I'm so firm about it having to be personal to you and personal to the moment. And there are times though where I'm out there in my garden or doing things on the land and it shifts my state. There are times when I'm spending times with the dogs and it shifts my state. And then there are other times where I need to spend time without the dogs and for myself. And so that is the what, right? The what is going to be, I would almost say the what can be anything that doesn't isn't harmful to yourself or another person, anything that's supportive. I think that, and I say that just because it is so personal. I don't think I ever would have necessarily, if you had told me 10 or 15 years ago that I'd be listening to YouTube videos of Abraham Hicks, I wouldn't have thought that would be the thing that would shift my state. So stay open to different possibilities and what resonates and what kind of you notice is effective for yourself. Knowing when, that's the discernment piece. That is I would say a certain level of in your body to kind of notice. And also, I think, if you're not in this initial thaw out period, which I will make a separate video about, coming out of a very numb experience, whether that is an eating disorder or some other experience where your emotions were really numb and really shut down. That initial period, the analogy that I use that I can go into more in that video I talk about a lot is when you go outside. I don't know, I have now learned though that not every single person experiences this, which I thought they did, but if you go outside, I live in Canada where it gets really cold, and if you go outside and your hands get so cold that they go numb, and then you come inside, and if you were to sometimes just being inside, when you're moving them to try to get the feeling back, it really, really hurts. Or if you run them under warm water, it really, really hurts. If you've ever gone in cold, a lot of people cold dip and stuff nowadays, it's sometimes if you stay in there long and then you go in a hot shower, it hurts when you're extremities are regaining their sensation, but it doesn't last forever. And so that's the piece of like that initial phase is a little bit different because your system is trying to find its sensation again. It's like a little extreme, it's more painful, it's more intense as it calibrates. So that's a little bit of a different thing. With this, it's like as you start to get to know and maybe notice that you are feeling really, in a lot of ways, controlled by your emotions, or kind of like they just come and take you and you don't have a lot of say, that is where a resource or a tool like this could be helpful. So that is what I will leave you with. Hopefully I haven't missed anything really important. And if I have, I'll make a follow-up video about it. And we will, over time, I will get better at being concise, and I will get better at following a single train of thought in these videos. But for now, I hope that this resonates and helps somebody out there. And I'm wishing you a beautiful day.